in the ever-growing paper trail that is the Joyful Series Big Interview, listeners, welcome back. We've got a treat today because I'm sitting looking at one of the great US sportsmen of all time, sportsmen, not just soccer players of all time. I'm sitting looking at a guy of smart brains and big character, and we're about to spend an extended period of time in his company. Brad Friedel, welcome to the Big Interview. Thank you for making time in your Massachusetts timetable. I think we've just established. Have I got the right state for you?
Yeah, I'm in Boston right now. I currently live in Miami, but I'm up in Boston today doing this.
But you wish you were in North London or in Birmingham or maybe down by the Mersey or.
Actually, North London, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I love the UK. Anywhere in the UK, to be honest with you.
Well, it's a starting place, Brad, because you've been well briefed. One, thank you, but you've been well briefed about the fact that this might seem idiosyncratic or even eccentric at times. But when I was growing up in Aberdeen, which is in the cold northeast of Scotland, there was a program on television called Minder. And it was I don't know if you've ever seen it or whatever, but it was a guy who was a minder for a kind of not crooked, but edge of the law businessman. It was deeply funny. And it was based in 1970s London. And it was the follow-up to a program called The Sweeney, which was about the flying squad in London in the 70s. And it was raucous and it was full of London wit, but it was full of accents and it was full of London locations. And sitting there as a teenager, I have no embarrassment at saying that my goal to move to live and work in London, which I did eventually and spent 5-6 years there before moving to Barcelona 20 years ago, was I have to relive Minder. I have to hear those accents. I have to hear those white boys. And I want to put you back to the 9-year-old Brad, because I'm going to ask you and talk to you at more length about your upbringing in a minute. But 9-year-old Brad Friedel finds himself on, I quote, a rickety London Underground train heading to Wembley, and you detail what you find there for the first time, and you're living a Minder script because there's geezers, there's beer, there's noise. You get to the stadium, it's your tale, you'll tell it, but there's a little bit of violence. There's cops charging around. Will you? Because I think it's a central part of the theme of you realizing dreams in your life. Will you take us back to what was 9-year-old Brad doing in London and paint your own picture of what it was like that day?
I was on just a family vacation around Europe with my mom, my dad, and my sister, and I believe at times my mom's mom and dad joined us in various cities, and I grew up playing every sport. But I really love football. Ice hockey and football were my two loves, and not American football. We're going with proper football. And my dad, I don't know how he got tickets, but he got tickets to the Charity Shield. I think it was the Charity Shield. It was Liverpool against West Ham, I believe. And that was the day that I became a Liverpool supporter. That's because growing up in Cleveland, we had a little bit of Liverpool on TV, and we had a bit of Bayern Munich on TV, but once a week type of stuff. Those two very successful clubs, obviously at the time, but not a lot. So there, I had to wait, to get my Soccer Digest once a month, kind of thing. It was one of those times, where the Soccer Digest is 3 days it's going to come, and then you could go through all the monthly results, and that you just didn't have a lot of paper trail. No computers obviously in the house. It wasn't Google. We didn't have, you couldn't get results readily. So anyways, we roll up to the game. My dad tells me, I'm going to take you to a game. Okay. I'd been to Cleveland Browns games. I've been to Cleveland Indians games. I've been to Cleveland Cavaliers games. Figured it's going to be similar. No way. It was, I remember, and I hope this is all right to you.
Oh, fuck me. You just charged right in,
whatever.
baby.
All right. So I remember one of the first things we get to the ground, and it's the old Wembley, and it is manic. I mean, you know, that the horses were enormous. I was only, you know, I was only a young boy at the time. The horses were enormous, and not too many times in the States had I seen police men and women on horses, you know, and like looking around and the fans and the singing. We don't have that in the United States. You know, you don't. Every now and again, there's a chant and a big roar, but like on the way outside stadiums into the grounds, you don't have droves of supporters and different supporters sections and coming from various areas of the globe and the country all together and coming in and singing their own songs, and it was just mesmerizing. There really was. And I look around, but I tell my dad, I mean, in the midst of all this chaos, I tell my dad's like, I got to go to the toilet, you know, and my dad is like,
thanks, kid.
Yeah, are you fucking kidding me? You know, it's like, so we wait in the queue. And I mean, and you're back then, you know, that and plus the drinking culture in the UK, just in general, you know, there was a lot of police presence, but you know, most everyone there was pissed, you know, and we go in there, and somehow, some way, which I know shouldn't have happened, there's West Ham supporters and Liverpool supporters in the loo at the time. And not many, but there was one or two. And I can't remember who did what on who, but one urinated on another in the stall, like not far from me. And a fight broke out. And the police come charging in, and my dad, and I had finished, my dad like swoops me up, you know, and I could see in his face, he's contemplating, do we stay or do we go? You know, he's like in one of those,
that's running backs for you. They can take a hit if they have to.
Yeah. But then we obviously stayed, and it was remarkable. I think the thing that I take away from it the most is and I'll just use the word culture. The culture over in the United States is more of I'm buying my ticket, and now you, and when I say you, the whole club, players, the club, the cheerleaders, the band, whatever, entertain me now. That's the American mentality. I'll cheer for you when you entertain me. Whereas there, the game hadn't even kicked off, and the culture is to back and support your club, no matter what. And even in the down times when fans are disgruntled and upset, there's still a great atmosphere around. It might be a little bit of a negative atmosphere, but it's still an atmosphere, and they want what's best for the club, and they want to win. So it was such a difference, and I loved it. I loved every minute of it, and it's probably why I love football so much, because in American sports, which I like as well, don't get me wrong, I'm not like bashing American sports, but it's a lot stop, start, and coaches get together and give you a play, and you go and do it again. Whereas football, you have a system, you have a style, but so many things happen in a game. It's far more fluid, and you can't call a timeout and say, hey, do this. You know, every now and again you get instruction, but you know, you got to figure it out on your own. And I like that about it on both sides.
What if over the period from 9 years and experiencing that, and actually getting a taste for it, which I admire, because also you're ringing a bell with me. I grew up in a football situation in Scotland whereby none of us advocates violence, for sure, but I don't mind being in and around a little bit of skirmishes. I don't mind an edge of danger when I do anything, never mind go to a game. And as a fan, when you get punched, and you kind of watch others making a good job of it, or know when you had to turn tail and show heels. But from 9 until now, whatever you are, 39, just turning 40, what have you been able to deduce about that British culture that you witnessed then, and you fueled as a really beloved player? Because it feels to me some of our tribalism, in terms of once you declare the colours, we don't fuck about with going that player's moved to that club, therefore we're going. Once the club's in there, as much as you might get angry or hate them, that it's in there for life, as if it was a stamp on your heart forever. And listen, I sang on the way to the podcast, and I'm half drunk, so like that's a part of our life every single day. And the singing on the way to the games, it feels to me part of our I don't know if it's a part of our military culture in Britain. I don't know if it's part of the class structure in Britain, where those who maybe don't, across the years, not just across your life, those who don't have much need something to elevate their lives, and therefore they'll commit to it and sing about it and look at it like a battle. How have you worked out why we're like what we're like?
I I put it more down to allegiances in a sense. Where and this is something that I love the most about living, not living in the UK, in England, not playing football, but living. I every little community that I lived in, it's like the pub culture. I don't mean going and getting pissed culture. It's I tell my American friends this: if you're ever in England, if you're ever like locked out of your home or you need help with something or whatever, you can walk down to your local pub, see 100 friendly faces, and almost every single one of them would drop everything to help you out with what you need at the time. It's an And why? Well, because I lived in Thaden Boys, and that's what people in Thaden Boys do for people in Thaden Boys. Like it's like that. Now, would they help someone that was in a town over? I don't know. Maybe not. But if you're there, I think these allegiances form, and I don't know if you go back in time, if it had to do with the class system. It could have. It absolutely could. But like once you're a Tottenham supporter, you're a Tottenham supporter. If you're a West Ham supporter, you're a West Ham supporter, and you might live right here and right here, but right next to each other. But that's it. And if West Ham relegates, they relegate, and you're still a West Ham supporter. If they go down to League One, you're still a West Ham supporter. You still have the tattoo. You'll still have it in your blood. That's it. Look at Man City's history, and that just name that just because I was living in Manchester at the time that they were doing the up down 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 down, and then boom, here we are today. It will and most of the Man City supporters when I lived in Manchester were local because of where the club was at. Man United was this global steam train rolling everywhere. People flew in from everywhere. Generally speaking, Man City was the locals, and I just think all these like allegiances form. I got the sense, especially in the north of England, there weren't a lot of travelers, and I don't mean traveling to a away game. I just mean in their life. Spain every now and again, Portugal every now and again, real homebodies. Like they like, they like waking up and having their cup of tea. They like going and doing the bowls. They like having they get set in a life, and where wait, it's 5 o'clock. I got to be at the pub. It's and they didn't really go branch out too much. London completely different.
Yeah.
Now I lived outside of London, in Essex, but in Thaden Boys, as I had said, and just Thaden Boys had a very not the mentality of the people, but the area had a very northern feel to it, with the way that it was set up in the pubs and the miniature Tesco and the small little areas and everyone sort of knew everybody. But the cosmopolitan nature of London is outstanding. I gotta say, it's my favorite city on the planet. It was magnificent, just with everything it had to offer, while also being able to live in the countryside.
Well, it's a stunning place that I enjoyed and I miss to this day, and I particularly miss the Thames, which just enchants me. And part of the message of this podcast is going to be to Antonio Conte and to Daniel Levy to get you back where you belong. But I need to turn that cultural analysis on its head. And if you'll tolerate me, because it's only if this interests you, but it does interest me. Two things about where you grow up, which predominantly I think is Bay Village. But
Yeah.
what over your life, because you're a very cosmopolitan, multicultural man, What over your life has being an Ohioan done for you? What did it teach you? What has stayed with you about being an Ohioan? And I need also to know if Lake Erie has had a big influence on you, simply because I'm obsessed by bodies of water. I have to live near the sea or a river. I cannot, will not ever live in a landlocked place. And the pool, the way that lochs, lakes, the sea, big rivers pull me, and to influence, the relationship wolves are supposed to have with the moon. That's me in water. Maybe you're sitting there thinking, this guy is fucking needs to be sectioned. But those are my two questions: being an Ohioan,
Yeah.
and Lake Erie.
All right, let's do Lake Erie first, because it's a shorter response. But I also like living on the water, near water. Lake Erie is like an ocean. The Great Lakes are enormous. So I never. If I was down in Florida visiting my grandparents growing up in Naples, and I looked out they lived over on the west coast of Florida. So if I'm looking over at the Gulf of Mexico, it looked the exact same as Lake Erie, not the beach. So don't, the listeners don't, don't say the beach is the same. That's not true. But the water looked the exact same. The city of Cleveland, if you go back, it has history of prohibition to it. It's a steel industry, steel town. The mafia set up shop at Terminal Tower. Very safe place back then because it was mafia run. A little anecdote: Elliot Ness from the film Untouchables, he lived in Bay Village for a short time because it's not far from where he probably had to try to stop a few people in Cleveland.
Because Lake Erie was a place you could run. The prohibition, for those who don't remember, is when America somehow, fucking hell, banned all alcohol.
Banned alcohol.
Bootleg alcohol would have come across Lake Erie
from Canada, correct? And they could have brought it in, and when they did, they brought it in droves. And I guess I'm glad I answered that part of the question first with Lake Erie, because Cleveland's not a soft town to live in. I would equate it to Newcastle. It's there's 4 seasons, and 2 of them are really nice weather, and 2 of them are brutal. Like minus 30-degree days, and the snow. I remember I grew up in the great, I think, blizzard of 1978. Where the snow was above the rooftop of a 2-story home. If you Google photos, it's remarkable. Just another little anecdote. When I trained even when I was at Blackburn and the weather was atrocious, I usually had a short sleeve shirt on, wear one of those Under Armour things underneath, just so I didn't cut up my arms. But people used to look at me and say, "Brad, you're mental." And no, I come from Cleveland. Like, this is nothing compared to the cold of Cleveland, And so growing up so Bay Village is softer than Cleveland.
Yeah.
But I grew up in sports, and you play everywhere, and it's a hard town. So when I was growing up, and you just get to the age to go to the bars and play pool and all that, usually a fight every night. Like you were saying, you don't mind being around it. I never really minded being around it. You get your wits about you a little bit. By no means was I a big fist thrower, but it didn't phase me. You go to a Cleveland Browns game, 100% there's going to be a fight. It's American.
In the dog pound or anywhere.
Usually the people in the dog pound that were throwing the snowballs that started the fight. So, so it was a hard into place to live, but Bay Village was soft. It was sheltered. You're talking about me being multicultural, and you're right. I am, but I also grew up around, dare I say it, all white people, like in my school, and looking at my mom was and still is an inner city teacher in Cleveland, and I attribute my upbringing and the way that I view people and life and the world on my mom and dad, but also the fact that at a really young age I was playing sports. And I played a lot of basketball where I would be the only white guy there, and and I got to see and appreciate people for who they are, not what they look like, not what their religion is, not any of the garbage that goes on in the world today, or the world even back then, but that goes on. So I think I was lucky as well that I was gifted in sports to be able to be given those opportunities. I was traveling from a young age, and then my mom and dad would drive me where, fly me, drive me wherever. And they didn't have a lot of money. They would give everything to my sister and myself to try to have us do our activities. And that's really where my mind was able to expand, to be honest with you. Because if I was just in Bay Village, and going back to how I saw like the Northern English, if you don't get to see and experience things from outside, it's very different to have a different view of life. And we're generally, we talk about kick racism out of football. What can athletes do? What can soccer do? Well, we can do a little bit. And I sincerely mean that. It's a little bit, because most all of that education is done inside your house, or with your real tight, close friends. So, you're not born a racist. You're taught it. Need that. And that's so. There's 3 sections of Ohio, really. You have your Cleveland, which is on Lake Erie. Like, in the certain parts, it's hard. A lot of good athletes, a lot of good business men and women. More of an East Coast feel to it than Midwest. Then you go to Columbus, and it's now a bit more cosmopolitan. But when I was growing up, it very much cornfields, very Midwestern feel to it. One little river, not much water. And then you have Cincinnati, which is right on the border of Kentucky. And the reason I'm telling you this, because there's another thing that molded my life, is one of the ends of the Underground Railroad during the Civil War was Oberlin, which is right by Cleveland. When you got into Oberlin city limits, you were free. You could go to school, you could work, whatever. So I grew up around that mindset, the liberal. It's if you Googled Oberlin College, I think it's still deemed today as the most liberal or one of the most liberal colleges in the United States, probably in the world. And so, and I used to play, they had an outdoor ice hockey rink. I used to go out there all the time. It was probably about 20-minute drive from my house. So I was also raised in knowing that. So it was no like a big epiphany. It just was what it was. It wasn't like I can't believe it or I can believe it. It was it's just how it was. So I consider myself really lucky, like growing up around mainly all white people, but then having the sports, having the history of what Cleveland was, having the history during the Prohibition, learning about my grandfather actually did some stuff during Prohibition, and so the stories that I had, it was remarkable. In Cleveland,
this is not a euphemism-free podcast, but you can't dangle did some stuff.
No, when I say no, he wasn't in the mafia. Listen, no, I'm not embellishing. Okay,
I'd love to have one granddad story.
All right, one granddad story was this. So he worked a multitude of jobs. He was a handyman. Like, it could do things, but he was very well respected. And he grew up at a time where he needed to be hard. So yeah. he could look after himself, of course. Yeah. Like, if you just shook his hands alone,
you felt it.
They were thick and leathered and
calloused.
He was working. So they never told me like what he delivered, but he had delivered something for not the police side of town in Cleveland. And there were speakeasies all over the place. Okay. And so there was a well-known speakeasy. When I was growing up, obviously you could drink alcohol, but they turned it into a restaurant. But the place was called White Oak, and there was a separate building that was now non-attached from the new restaurant. And they kept it there because of the history of it. And you can still see the door. And my grandmother, when my grandfather passed away, my grandmother took me there and he said, "You see this
That's
door right there?"
fantastic.
And I said, "Yeah." She goes, this is where Howard was his name. This is where Howard and I used to come to drink during Prohibition. And I said,
Fabulous.
I went, how? And they said, "Well, do you notice on the front, it's just brick?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, if you go around the side," and I followed her. We used to knock on this door and the little thing would slide and it's a speakeasy. And they would either see us, but Howard had to give them a number or a code. I was never allowed to hear it. I was always stood back, and then they'd go in.
This is your grandmother. This is your grandmother had to stand back.
Yeah.
And often, in case there was a problem, they'd also, I want a cup of coffee or whatever. It was all coded, all hidden, because it was fully illegal to drink. The speakeasies got raided by Elliot Nesses of this world, maybe Elliot Ness's deputies, etc. Yeah. What a culture! What an amazing culture!
Yeah, it was, and when I only, like, Elliot Ness wasn't a big part of Bay Village and growing up, and I'm not even sure like how big he was on the force in Cleveland. I have no idea. I don't know if the film The Untouchables embellished things or blew it up with Elliot Ness per se. I'm not sure, but I do know that he had the house on Lake Road in Bay Village. And then the other thing in Bay Village that happened that molded who we were was the Sam Shepard case. Because
mid-50s, I guess.
Yeah.
Murder case?
Murdered his wife, I believe.
Yeah.
And so whenever you were in law school or doing like any kind of pre-law or anything like that in high school and then going into your universities, the Sam Shepard case was big. Now I didn't go into law, so I don't know why, but something happened, and it came up almost every year from the time I was like 5th grade up until I graduated. So like 7 straight years, there would be at least like a week of something on the Sam Shepard case in school. And you would see his house, there's a plaque on it. I mean, it was remarkable, really. Like,
it's a beautiful answer that I hope will help people understand you and your later strength and your decisions and your character. And maybe it'll encourage some people to go visit Ohio. I know I will go. I've never been on Lake Erie, but I will go. We haven't got time to talk about it, but Ohio also to me means Dean Martin, up there with one of my favorite singers of all time and quite a character too. I think this has helped bridge into something that we needed to ask you, obviously, and which our sponsors, Bet365, has asked us to. They've just sent in the question, what was it like being a young goalkeeper in the Turkish Super League? And I'm interested because we can't spend, you've achieved so much. And also, I want to go into depth about your position, your playing of that position, your psychology, that's coming. But when you go to Galatasaray, there's so much background about where you've been, I hate to use the word, but you've used it before. And when you went to Promo Sport, you went, this is the one time in my life where I'm not owned by somebody. Your registration has been owned by clubs, but you were owned by Milan Mandaric, which is just extraordinary. You struck one of the, there wouldn't have been many people globally in that year who struck a better deal than you did with Milan Mandaric. And to go to Galatasaray, to see what you saw, to experience what you experienced, to learn, if I'm not wrong, to learn a bit of, you were reasonably comfortable in Turkish, at least at that time, and to culminate in the cup final. Now I understand how a youngish Brad Fiedel coped with all that.
Yeah, I love change in my sporting life and business life. And when I mean change, opportunities, I love seeing new things. Like to have stability for my children, but I like change and even giving them things to see and opening their eyes. I had a terrible time of getting a work permit, you know, I kept having all these wonderful clubs and head coaches scout me and sign contracts, and have the permit denied. Graham Souness was one who tried to sign me when he was at Liverpool. And it was at the time that we were about to try to go into contract, he went into the hospital. And then shortly after that, he left his position or was fired at Liverpool. Roy Evans had taken over, and we had restarted the communication. But at that time, I had to go, and I had signed for Newcastle and couldn't get a work permit. Went to Brøndby for a short spell while I was trying to figure out things. And then Graham took the job at Galatasaray. And I knew Galatasaray by name, had never been to Turkey before. And I was in Denmark training with Viborg at the time, just to stay fit, because a friend of mine, Mike Burns, who was with the national team, had just signed a contract there. So once I was out there, I got the call from Paul Stretford, who was my agent at the time, and he said, apparently, as it turns out, well, the first goalkeeper at Galatasaray broke his arm, but Graham wasn't really, it didn't really like him all that much anyways. And there was another goalkeeper who was a younger one, and the board kept telling him he was the guy, and he made a mistake in one of the preseason games, but I think against Beşiktaş or Fenerbahçe, but one of the big games, but before the season started. And he went over to the post, and the posts at the old Ali Sami Yen were solid. They were the old, and he headbutted it. And he was like bleeding, and I mean, I'm pretty sure that back then, I mean, there's no concussion test or anything, but he was more than likely concussed himself. So Graham was like, how can I have this guy? And you can only have 3 foreigners, and realistically, if you go in as a foreign coach, you don't want to spend one of your foreign spots on a goalkeeper if you can help it. But he got in a position where he had Hakan Şükür, who was outstanding. Dean Saunders was there. Barry Venison was there at the time, but then Barry left shortly after, and Uli van Gobel came in. So he was, and we had like 2 guy, Burak Elmas. We had Arif, Swat, Little Okan, who played at AC Milan for a time. Like these were the national team players that were just qualifying for the Euros for the first time. So we had a lot of really top quality Turkish national team players. So he was able to use one of the foreign spots on me, and we went in and we stayed. Like we were all living at the Polat Renaissance Hotel when we first signed contracts. I came in shortly after Dean, Graham, and those. I was probably a month later because they had started the preseason, and I didn't come in until maybe it was the first after the 1 game or 2 games into the season. And I remember there's all this fanfare, and I didn't speak a word of Turkish, obviously, at the time. But I mean, right when I landed, and it was just me. I flew in from Denmark. I have all all these bags, and I'm bringing in, and nobody told me at the time that I needed exact change for the visa to get into Turkey, and I didn't even have a mobile phone then. No. This is going back then, so it wasn't like text or anything. It's like, if they sent the email, and I got it before I had left, but then, and it was all that AOL, that, you've got mail and all that, it was back during that time.
Different times.
Yeah. So I land, and I have credit cards, and I have, a few hundred
couple bucks. Of krona.
Yeah. And like a couple $100 bills. And I get there, and no English, no Turkish, only English. And I look, and the other side of customs, it's glass. And I just see, well, okay, I'll exaggerate now. What seemed like, 5,000 people, but, a few hundred people, but like all lined up, and with all these cameras and out there. And I didn't, I was like, no, that's not for me. I mean, I haven't even signed my contract yet, And so, and plus it was about 1 o'clock in the morning. It was a late flight. They would not let me in. And I was like, and I went, no, no. And I had money, but I couldn't understand that they were saying, like, they were being kind. They were like, don't give me that because it's too much. And they were saying, like, do you have, they kept saying Arkadash, which is friend. But I didn't know what it meant. And then finally I see Paul Stretford there at the window, and he's like, what? And I'm like, I was like, money. And he was like, he's looking at me like, you didn't fucking bring any money. And I was like, no, money. You know, anyway, so we get in, and right when I came through, I mean, the paparazzi, it's just and on you. And you know, and from that point on, like, somebody else had to get the bags, and you're you know, straight into a car, and, you know, straight to the Polat Renaissance Hotel, where they wouldn't let anyone else in. You know, and then you go into sign your contract the next day, and the media. I mean, it's just what was remarkable for me was I knew Liverpool was a massive club because it was Liverpool, and we went through the history of why I supported them. And by this time, I knew a lot about Liverpool and the history. You know, Man United's a big club. You hear that Galatasaray is a big club. You don't realize how big until you're there. And it is enormous. It doesn't have the quality of history of a Barcelona, of a Real Madrid, of the Man Uniteds, but it's got some deep history, and
it's life and death to the fans, isn't it? Life and death to the fans.
It really is. You know, as a journalist over there, I think what you'd find remarkable is that I used to ask why there's so many pictures, and they said, well, there's a vast majority of the population that won't be able to read if we write too much. So we try to fill the papers with as much pictures of you guys as possible. And they weren't like pictures with us at a store. They were like on the training ground.
Yeah.
You know, open training, open trainings most all the time. And if you didn't do that, you would have some issues with the supporters clubs and things of that nature. They lived it. But so I hadn't even signed the contract yet, and they're trying to follow me in the hotel everywhere I went. And people are trying, you know, sneaking through security and trying to see what you're doing, even if you're just sitting by the pool, if you're going to the gym, if you know, and in England, and in Denmark, the two places I had been prior to that, people want to know who you are. They will ask you for the odd photo, and then they'll ask you for an autograph. But unless you're the Beckham or the Ronaldo, like, you can live your life.
There's a sense of respect about personal space, isn't there?
That's the best. Yeah, there really is. And I also think the education level of, and not school education, the football education of the supporters in England is enormous. I really do. I think they appreciate certain things, and one of the other things they appreciate is to allow you to go to Tesco and shop on your own.
Yeah.
You know, they'll give you that. In Turkey, no way. Like, if you went out of the house, expect to be mobbed, and not a bad way. I really like the people and the culture in Turkey. But I think the Turkish players, especially the ones that spoke a bit of English, very interested to hear what an American thought about Turkey. Ask me all the time, do you like it? Do you like it here? Do you like it? What do you think? Is it okay?
But that was them wanting reinforcement, because they're enormously proud of their country, their culture, their history.
And curious what the rest of the world thought about them.
Yeah.
Very, very curious.
But you already knew a little bit of the Ottoman Empire. You'd a smattering of knowledge of
I did, because I was a history major at UCLA, and I had studied that a bit. But there's a difference of studying in a book and and meeting people. You know, so my neighbor that lived upstairs, you know, the first time they had two children, and the daughter, remember when we first met, you know, needed to be covered around me, and then after he got to know me, didn't, you know, and I found it I found it remarkable, but in a really good way. You know, take this young kid out of Ohio, you know, who had a lot of culture and sport, and some with Civil War history. Go out to LA into a melting pot of everything and everybody, and a huge Spanish speaking culture out in LA that I'd never been around. And then I'm getting touted to get over to England, which is very much more similar to Cleveland. And then I find myself in Turkey, and never lived around you know, a Muslim culture in my life. And I guess the biggest thing I learned about it, Graham, was that we all live in our own propaganda. That's what I learned straight away. So I was basically, you know, taught growing up that the Russians were against us.
Yeah.
Iran and Iraq was against us. And the truth of the matter is the governments have issues. Individual people, I don't have a problem with anyone that's Russian. I never had a problem with anyone from Iran or Iraq.
Yeah.
That's reality of the situation. So when I was over at you know, learning about Muslim cultures and the different factions and who is portrayed as good and bad, it was remarkable, because it'd be like I'd then watch maybe CNN, and it's completely different to what Al Jazeera, and I'm actually living where they're reporting on it, and I know that what Al Jazeera is saying is correct, and what CNN is saying is incorrect.
It's propaganda.
Yeah.
You struck a big chord with me, because, you know, without we don't need to, we won't get massively involved in Muslim culture, but when you see something as simple as there was a family upstairs, there was a young girl. Initially, when they didn't know me, she was covered. When they got to know me and trusted me, that wasn't an issue. She didn't have to. If you see that as simply as that, there's a reasonably strong degree of logic to that. That's fine as a concept. I remember coincidentally going to Qatar to interview Xavi, and arriving at 3 a.m, taking a lot of time to get through the airport, getting to bed in the hotel, to be woken to the call to prayer, which I'd never heard in my life. Even in London, I hadn't lived near enough a mosque, but the mosque was right next to my window, I think. The extent you could open it and look out, and maybe it was 5 a.m. So I'd had, I don't know, and immediately I was pissed off to fuck. I've just got to sleep. We've got work today. You open the window, and the mosque is so full that there are dozens and dozens of people kneeling down in prayer in the pavement outside. They're up at 5 a.m. They must have been up at 4 to be there. That level of devotion, that level of sacrifice, if you don't at least want to understand it, or if it doesn't generate respect in you immediately just for the basic act of how much they're putting into it, then I think you're a pretty shallow person. But whatever conclusions you wish to draw, you don't even get these pictures in your mind until you move, until you look, until you're open enough to go, well, I'd like to know a little bit more.
Well, Graham called he called a training session. We had a training session. I can't remember why, but it either had to be pushed up or pushed back. And I remember Ahmed, one of the assistant coaches and translators, said, Graham, that's during prayer time. And Graham said, I know I'm not doing it to be disrespectful. And Ahmed said, well, you know, some of the players may need to go out of training at the time. You know, and Graham, very respectful, of course. You know, Graham is a very intelligent man, and right, you know, when the call to prayer was coming, I think 8 or 9 players went over, and did, you know, and what I was curious about, and you know, I won't name names at the time because some people will know them, but I asked, I said, so, like, why is that group praying and you're not? And that's where, you know, well, there's different levels of faith, you know, and you know, and oh, fantastic, you know, and all of it was learning when they is it a sheep or a goat they sacrifice?
I think it's a goat, by legend at least.
Yeah.
I think it's a goat.
Well, it happened in front of me, like, because It happened right. There was Boulant, the captain, and then the goalkeeper, and we were playing at Denizlispor, I believe it was, and they did it. And and the Turkish players would dip down and dip their hand in the blood and put it either on their head, some of it on the boots and things like that. And it was for luck. You wouldn't see that in the United States. The way I view all that is how lucky am I to see it? That's how I view it. Like, without, I think it's very closed-minded to be, what are you doing? Like that's their culture. I tell you how I always viewed it, even when I went out to LA, I view other people's states, other people's cities, other people's towns, other people's countries as for me to go and adapt to them, and not the other way around. And I think that's one of the reasons why I found my time in the UK so endearing with the fans of the clubs that I was at, because I always tried to engulf myself in their culture, and try to acclimatize as best I can. That's why I think the Galatasaray fans still today, when I walk around places, will remember me. And I mean, I'm 50 now. I mean, how can you remember me? I played there in 1996, I think it was.
Football fans, once we fall in love, Brad, that's it, man. That's it.
Yeah. And so, that's the best way to put it. And I think somebody asked me a long time ago, why do I think English players have a hard time going abroad? So I think David Beckham was a tremendous success, but he's more of a global pop star, if you like. And then with his, with he and Victoria, they were a different machine going outside. Steve McMahon was a friend of mine when he went to Spain. That took some adapting. It really did. I was surprised at how I was surprised in knowing Gareth Bale as well as I do. I was surprised. Take the language side out of it, but I was surprised that he liked Madrid so much. Not Real Madrid, of course. I mean, how can you not like the club? But I was surprised that when he went outside the UK, like that he would even consider settling there at some stage in his life. That surprised me, because the English players generally don't like going out and then adapting to somebody else's culture.
We don't mind being challenged on the pitch. We don't mind being bawled out by the coach. We don't mind if it becomes physical. We don't mind being told you're not going to make it. I cherish the fact that I've lived abroad. But many of them don't like being challenged culturally. They don't like being told you're going to go outside a certain comfort zone, which it's a theme that equates to the people you saw in the north who love to live in their little neighborhood, their village, keep the routines, know this guy, know the family, down the pub. Why we're creatures of routine, why we're scared to be, there's this perception amongst Brits that we'll be humiliated if we get a phrase wrong, and I don't like the taste of that. I don't understand it, but it's a real thing.
Trip when I was with Blackburn to, we were Washington, D.C. We're staying at the Ritz-Carlton in Georgetown. Exactly. So
wow,
great training pitches, beautiful hotel. Wake up in the morning, we get down to breakfast, and then one of the lads says to me, Brad, can you see if they have any English breakfast tea? And I look at him and I went, they do speak English here. That was the move. And he goes, yeah, but you're American. Can you see? So the fella's like standing right there. So it's like, I just shouted across the room. I was like, excuse me, do you have English breakfast tea? And they said, no, we have Lipton, the American. And they actually said, oh, this place is shit. And I'm like, we are at a Ritz-Carlton in Georgetown, in DC.
Georgetown, beautiful.
Season, you have a Premier League contract, and you can't get English breakfast tea, and this place is shit. Like, I couldn't get my head around it.
We are weird beyond description. Where does that come from? But it's the it's the same fear of the unknown that goes into, and I don't want to take us in open university research territory, but you said, where does racism? Well, you're taught it. And part of that is fear of the unknown, fear of the different, whether it's somebody with a different accent, a different colored skin, or a different religion, or a different fucking tasting tea. We are the weirdest fucking bunch on the planet.
I mean, so this, the individual is probably, in the top, what, 0.5% of wage earners in the United Kingdom, like good looking, good looking wife, great kid. I'm like looking at him going, you have so much fucking, like, there's nothing negative in your fucking life. And this place is shit because it's tea, because of the tea. I'm like, oh my God.
We've got to, because, we've only got about 33 odd minutes left from both our perspectives. I wanted to ask you about learning Olympic values by osmosis, because the UCLA time where you are in the company of Olympians doing other things, therefore, not just in their elite nests, but out doing something that entertains them and you're watching their values. You played spectacularly well in two big Olympic Games, and learned a lot, I think, from particularly maybe the younger experience in Barcelona, particularly maybe once you'd performed valiantly in the group and been knocked out. I wanted to ask you about that, but frankly, I have to ask you about goalkeeping and the psychology of becoming better with each passing year, but also at Galatasaray, they were throwing so much coins at you that, effectively you could have probably retired on that. When you're a goalkeeper, it is irrespective of being now maybe more than when you were playing. It's not 10 men and a goalkeeper, it's 11 men. Maybe you always felt treated like 11 men. Presumably you always acted that way. But I still always think about, you need to be mulishly stubborn to be a goalkeeper. There's you and the three posts. There's people forget about bashing your body up all the time, not just with boots opponents, but down onto the ground, the damage you do there all the time. But also the psychological weight of people looking at you and relying on you and being judged differently from a manager, being judged differently from a chairman, and being judged differently from every other one of your teammates. That changes a man's mind, and it needs a gigantic personality, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Skin of leather, really. Your mistakes generally lead to a goal against. That's number one. So straight away, the way that I like live my time in between games was I trained like a crazy man. I was always really fit. I loved it. I really did. I would do the running with the outfield players, until I got to, really old. I loved being in the gym. I loved doing yoga. I loved all of that. And it relaxed me, to be honest with you. It didn't make me more intense. It relaxed me through the week. So then when you got in between the sticks in the game, you were mentally ready for everything, because that's where any of the anxiety or the stress or that would creep in, and you would have a lot more stress as a younger goalkeeper than an older goalkeeper. There's no doubt. It's funny. I always put it like, when you're young, you have the blinkers on. All you can see is in front of you, and you hear all the noise around you, and it's like, you make that first great save and the blinkers go back a little bit and the game like widens up and everything lightens up. The first back pass to you and you fuck up your kick and it closes like that, and the noise gets louder. When you get older, it's easy. And what I found when I got to like 33, 34, 35 is you see the similar supporters at the grounds that you go and play. The season ticket holders, the
faces you recognize.
You can start to have banter, and they start to respect you because you've been there so long. Like I remember one at Southampton, there was a supporter who used to sit when you came out to the right at Southampton down at St. Mary's, and he was always, if you're looking at the goal to the left, about 2 rows up, and he'd become a bit portly as time went on, you know. So I'd made a save in a game, and the ball, or no, shot went wide, but I had it covered, and the ball went wide, and I was going back to pick it up, and he was like, and I think I was probably 37 at the time, and he was like, "Fucking hell, Brad, you still playing?" And I was like, "You put on some timber, though, haven't you, over the years?" You know, and the supporters laughed, and he laughed, and it was like, so, and like all that, I couldn't have done that when I was younger, because it was all like, I got to prove myself, I got to do this, and if I don't prove myself, and you know, and I'm an American over here, and I get dope, there's even another standard on top of it that I have to prove to people, and you know, I became obsessively superstitious when I was gaining the respect of you know, my time at especially my first probably 4 or 5 years at Blackburn, like crazily superstitious. And it actually wasn't until I spoke to Martin Keown once, and he was crazy superstitious, and I was like, it gets to a point where it like overtakes your you know, that from the day before a game to the end of the game, it's like a ball of stress that, you know, if you don't eat this, if you don't go there, if you don't drive in that car, if you don't go this way, if you don't, like, it becomes,
Brad, isn't it an addiction?
Yeah, it's like, and so what Martin Keown said, he goes, I was like that. He goes, and what I ended up saying to myself, my superstition now is, if I'm ever superstitious, then you know, it's all going to go to shit, you know. And you also for me, it became less like, once I knew, like, I knew that I was doing pretty well, you know, like in it, like what I prided myself looking back on it, not while I was doing it, was I was consistent. You know, I may not have been the best shot stopper in the league, you know, on any given year, but I was usually in the top 3 or 4, like, you know, and every year, you know, kind of like, you know, I wouldn't have been the best at catching crosses, but I wouldn't have been bad. You know, I tried to be consistent throughout the time. And I think that's why I was able to play and be a starter with so many different managers, because they could go, there's the consistency. So to get to your point, people are throwing coins at you. I mean, I even had a lawn dart thrown at me at the cup final from a Fenerbahce supporter. I mean, the thing was large, landed about like 6-8 feet away from me. And excuse me. So, you know, playing in Costa Rica, Saprissa Stadium, they fill bags of piss, big bags of piss, and they throw it, and they had like the chicken wire around the stadium, and it would hit and it splatter all over you. I remember in Costa Rica as well, I would go down to pick up a ball for a goal kick, and I must have gotten spit on 50 times. The fans, and I'm the one that got booked, because I went to the referee. I said, look at my kit, and he's like, you're wasting time. And I said, no. Yeah, no, promise. And we were losing 1-0. I was like, how am I wasting time? I was like, what? I was like, you're booking me. And he's like, and then at halftime, he goes, I booked you because if I do it the opposite way, we could incite a riot. I said, I am being spit on. I'm having piss thrown on me, and you're booking me? You know, and so anyway.
And he's trying to tell you he was doing you a favor as well.
Yeah. So
Thanks, mate.
My point is, as a goalkeeper, no matter what you're feeling inside, the outside can't look like that.
Yeah.
And you learn how to deal with that. So the best goalkeepers in the world, for me, are the ones where the mistake doesn't bother them.
Yeah.
Because we all make them. And it doesn't matter if you're a Neuer, you know, or levels below, everyone makes a mistake, right? And after the mistake, you have to, even inside, your whole body is like this. You have to learn to calm it down. And if you can't, you will never be one of the most successful goalkeepers.
Okay, so you saying that, you know, I've got goosebumps, because I recognize the art I understand that the thing you are talking about separates great human beings from other human beings, not just footballers. And it makes sense. It clicks. So fine. And we knew coming into this that you were articulate, and I imagine you'd be a superb teacher, superb coach. But saying all these things, knowing that truth, and achieving it inside this fucking mad machine that we're all giving up top, achieving that you've just explained so articulately, that's not easy. How did you do it?
You have to have a talent, you know, I mean, to get to, as a sportsman, as a sportsman or woman, like, you know, you mentioned UCLA. I mean, at one time, and this is no bullshit, like I had Carl Lewis lifting weights on my right and Jackie Joyner Kersey on my left. Well, yeah, they could lift a lot of weights, and yeah, they were, you know, they were coached by the best. They're fucking good athletes. Just without a weight, they were good athletes, right? You know, so you have to have you have to have the tools to it as well. The best answer, Graham, is there's two to it. One is hard work. You know, I've never seen. I'll just use his name again because his free kicks were stunningly accurate. David Beckham didn't get good at free kicks because he went home at 11 o'clock every day. Georgie Hadji, who I was with for a short time at Galatasaray, was not good at free kicks because he fucked off at 11:30 every day. Repetition, 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 repetition. So the hard work and determination, all that stuff, you have to have that with your talent. But the second answer, Graham, is I don't know the answer. It happens. And people are, what do you mean it happens? This is how it happens. I start with under 7 football and I make the next team. Okay, natural. Now I'm on the under 9s. Then we have tryouts again when I'm 10, you know, when you're 10, and I make the under 11s. Then I get asked to play basketball and I go and I try out, and I've never been coached. Yet you made that team. Okay. You ask me how? Don't know. I'm a young kid. So talent. Okay. It's just talent. Now you go up, now you start getting coached. Right. And if a coach ever told me, the American football coach told me I'd never amount to anything in my life if I didn't play American football, because it was in the same season as soccer. So for me, and the way that my attitude is, I was like, instead of going home and going, oh, Mom, I think I have to play American football. I didn't even tell my mom. I just went, I walked out and I said, fuck you.
Fuck you. I knew that was coming.
I'm gonna play my football.
Good
right?
Man. Good man.
And that's, you know, and that's where it was, you know. And I think you used the word stubborn. I'm stubborn as can be. And I think my stubbornness hurt a couple times as well. You know, like I think I probably would have started in the 1994 World Cup if I had signed for Adidas.
Ahead of Miola.
Yeah, but he signed for Adidas. I was offered the contract first, and I was told by many sources that, like, why didn't you sign? Well, here's the reason that I didn't sign. My deal with Sandico and Reebok was paying like 300 grand a year, and Adidas offered me 25 grand a year. So it wasn't like 25 and 30.
Yeah.
It was
insulting.
It was a big difference, right? Now, I'm just not the political guy to play that game. So again, I said, fuck you. You said why I was owned by Milan Mandaric, because I told US Soccer the same thing. I am not signing, you're a federation. I'm not signing a contract with you on a month-to-month basis, so you own my rights. You're a federation. So Milan took it over. And then, and it was the best thing that I did, because I got to Europe shortly after that. You know, so you're asking, how do you do it? You know, the coaching, you go to the big clubs, and the coaches can help you. And people say this, and when I coach young children, I try to ask them, how did you do that? How did you do that? Because I used to jump on boxes, you know, up here at UCLA, you know, with all the NFL guys and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, how do you walk out at Wembley and not be nervous? I don't know. And I'm sorry, I can't answer it like better than that. Like, am I just reassured in myself that I was good? I don't know, because inside I had these superstitions. I was fucking crazy. So I was just as nervous as somebody else, but like once I got over the white line, so to speak, it all just like it was all just seemed normal.
It feels to me as if I'm a believer, so I'm glad that God blessed you with that mix of abilities. But it's clear that without going back to it, from you've only told us about your grandparents through parents, but upbringing, attitude, genes. I think we can understand why you got there. But I love and one day we'll come back to this thing that I now talk about, the goldfish memory, whereby certainly in golfers, but in keepers too, when you talk about that, if you can just goldfish it and go, like, okay, that's gone. I can't do that over certain arguments with people, or if I've used a word badly on television, and it'll live with me and drive me crazy sometimes for days or weeks, or okay, sometimes for hours. But that ability to erase something where you've made a mistake, or you've done something wrong, or let yourself down, and be as good as you should be in 5 minutes or 5 seconds or 50 minutes or a day later. I think that's a huge part of success in both life and sport. But we're running down the clock, and so out of respect, I want to say sorry to Brian Johnson and Andrew Pod. Brian is very clear you're better than both your competitors at Liverpool. Andrew wanted to know about the difference between the club at Liverpool and Blackburn, and how much he thought you were amazing at Blackburn. We talked a little bit about World Cups, and Michael English was talking about. I think Michael got the closest to his answers, but I want to finish with two quick ones. This one is simple and much more fun. Our sponsors, Bet365, want to know about which is the opposition player across your career that you most dislike coming up against, where you're like, superstition or not, fuck, it's this guy. He's got something on me. Was there one?
Shearer. This guy, man, like I was a goalkeeper that I communicated a lot, and I tried to, especially at Blackburn at times, and we had good teams, by the way. Blackburn, I mean, to touch on that question, Blackburn was run by a different board. We were good. We had very, very formidable teams back then with Graham Souness and Mark Hughes at the helm. So very rarely would we go into a game thinking that we were going to lose no matter where we were playing. But every now and again, you would play the great Arsenal team, or the great, the great Man United team. And and you were up against it, of course. But many teams across Europe would have been up against it. It was so. Anyways, but Alan Shearer, he was at Newcastle, and there were times where the Newcastle side wasn't great. But I would scan the field, and I knew he, at certain moments, okay, Shearer's going to be making his run across, and he's going to get to that near post. I know he's going to be there. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to make sure I'm positioned there before I know it. Ball's behind me, like motherfucker, and I used to, especially, at that time I was in my early 30s, so I was calm, and I could I get pictures in my head. You're playing Arsenal. The other one that I would put in that is Dennis Bergkamp. So those were probably the two. And Dennis, I'd have to look. I'm sure he scored a goal or something on me, but it was his orchestration of what was happening, and I would try to communicate to stop it. And the second, like, you would, for a 5-minute spell, you would like shut him down. He was so clever, and he used to then find the space somewhere else. And then I would see Thierry Henry drifting off, and I just knew that I'm facing a one-on-one with Henry on my right-hand side. I can't cheat to go to my far post, because then I'll whip it to the near post. I'm going to have to stand my ground, and if he hits it accurately, it's a goal, because I won't be able to save it from this angle. Like it was maddening, and so what I had to try to do, and it's so much difficult, so hard for anyone to stop Henry when he was in his heyday, but it was Bergkamp for me that was orchestrating it. Henry was finishing it off, and it was so hard to stop him from getting in his spaces. And there was Shearer, he was he could score all different ways, but it was and he was friends with a good friend of mine, and he used to have banter off the field before we were playing, like just indirectly. I never like text. I don't even have Alan's number or anything, but we would like have banter, like there's no way I'm letting him, have a near post goal this time. Bam, goal, 2 goals, and I'm thinking, like, whereas I think if Michael Owen did an interview, like he whenever he was on a breakaway with me, he never scored. Like I just had I had his number, maybe because I faced so many shots from him in training and I just knew it.
Repetition.
With Alan, I would be like, I'd like wake up in the morning, no fucking way Alan Shearer is scoring on me today. And then even when we won a game 3-2, Alan Shearer too. I'm like, fuck. I was
he amongst those talents you mentioned, he had because he's not a big guy. All right, his thigh muscles are in good shape, but he had the sweetest connection with the football in order to generate power for kilo to force.
And backlift like this.
Nothing.
Robert, so people ask, like, the greatest finishers. Actually, put it this way: John McDermott asked me when I was at Tottenham, "What's Harry Kane like, really?" And because I was doing my coaching and Harry was with the academy and then coming up, and I said he has a backlift and a whip like Fowler and power of Shearer. And John McDermott looked at me. He goes, "What are you smoking?" And I was like, I know I'm old. I know I'm older, but I'm still training with the first team and I'm still facing shots from everyone.
I know.
I'm finding it really difficult, John, to ever stop Harry Kane's shots. And if I do save them, I'm not holding them. I'm not even close to holding them. I'm just happy to get something on it.
Wow.
And he was like, really? And then Robbie saw him, he was doing his badges. I saw him at St. George's Park and he said, "Harry Kane, real deal?" I said, "Phenomenal, Robbie." I said, how your backlift was nothing? Because that's what Robbie was the best at.
And just so that listeners understand, that one of the keys for a keeper there is the backlift is short. You get very little time to either read it or check whether your positioning's right.
We usually take like a little hop, sometimes forward, back, or our feet are, at some stage you have to get light on your feet before you can push off and power. He goes, so a trigger on a lot of players, when they lift up that great big backlift, you can take your little hop and then you're ready. What you don't count for is the real short ones. And Harry Kane's, Alan Shearer's, Robbie Fowler's, the real short backliffts. And you're in the air as the ball's leaving their foot. So then you have to come down and then go and you're dead. And on top of that, with the 3 that I just mentioned, their accuracy is so good that, the Van Nistelrooys as well, he had a little bit more of a wind up, but his accuracy on his finishing, right in the corner. And if you ever slipped that little bit, if you ever had, if you ever just on your heels a little bit, goal.
The last one that I need to, that's beautiful, man. I wish we could do a full fucking day of this, the first 24-hour interview. The last one is important to me because we started this exercise wanting to hear from you. And I'd like to see you as involved and satisfied either in the development of US football or back in the UK. I'd like to see the best Brad Friedel from 50 onwards, as we saw in his professional career across all the countries in which you played. What would be the things, Brad, that if I could open the box and give it to you, that would satisfy you, say, for the next 10 years of your professional work, that would give you the pleasure and professional satisfaction to the max?
I'd love to be and I think I've educated myself enough on this, a sporting director of football.
Ah, brilliant. Yeah.
That's what I've done since I've retired. I've done everything, always involved in football, but from the punditry side to the head coach of the youth national side, the head coach of a senior team. I own and operate the U.S. office for Promo Sport, and I'm really enjoying the agency work. and everything. Now that I've done the last 2 years, a lot of work on the business side of football. That would be outstanding. And one of the things, like, I really feel for Nuno right now, and it did not work out for him, no doubt. And you can't lose 5 games out of 10, and when you're in when you're at a club like a Tottenham, but you could tell now, and you see the quotes that come out, that he was never their guy anyways.
No.
And I would never, I got bitterly, I had a real bitter time, and it was the unhappiest that I'd ever been in my life. My last sort of 6 months as a head coach at New England, when you're not given sort of the keys to the castle to do what is needed, it's really hard to succeed. So going into the head coaching again, I'm not so sure that would please me, because if I ever saw a sight of what went on, it's very hard to govern what's above you sometimes. Below you is not simple, but it's what someone like myself is very much educated for. What's above you, when you can't control it, it's such an unknown, and it's so unstable, and it's so frustrating that that I don't think, if you said 10 years, would you want to do that? I don't think it is, because the constantly looking over your shoulder, and the constant, like, if it was only the players that you'd have to deal with, fantastic.
The phrase managing upwards now is used a lot, and there are very few managers who are good at it. Fergie in his way was, but Ancelotti's very good because he came through under Berlusconi. There are a few managers who are good at managing upwards, and it's an extra task that a successful coach manager doesn't really need to have to do. There's such a universe of work and difficulties and unpredictable things about managing a group of players, and then managing matches, that to manage up is a drain on resources. But unfortunately, it's now essential.
Well, you have to do it. So, like, I would, you're saying, like, if you gave you a box, like, I would rather be the guy that's hiring the guy, but knowing in my mind that I want continuity. Like, it as but that would be somebody that's even above me, giving me the keys to, and giving me the responsibilities and the trust to run it properly. You give me the budget, we'll run it, and because when you go into these projects and then you see 6 months fired, I mean, in Spain, sometimes it's crazy. 3 games, you're out. Italy, 4 games and you're out. And you're thinking, like, have you even seen one training session, but in one meeting? Like, it's strange. It's a very bizarre business sometimes when you see it, the coaching side of it.
Well, my take on this, Brad, is, as we call a halt to this session, is that my understanding is that, apart from bringing excellence and intelligence and experience into a sporting director of football role, I can fully imagine you, over a period of time at the right club, imbuing a culture around a club, its attitudes, its decisions, the training ground, the employees beyond that. And I think the great clubs that I've witnessed during my life have that. Somebody who isn't simply, he or she isn't simply good at their job, but generates a cultural change and unity, teaches well, shows well, and that becomes something that's identifiable about the club, from its decision-making to its attitudes to its fans, buying, selling, playing, and hopefully winning. I wish I had that box to open for you. I hope I'll see it coming through soon. It occurs to me that Newcastle, absolutely, a very Cleveland-esque city, if you don't know. Newcastle don't have one of those just yet. So
I am sure there's a it's a
I'm going to put you in the conversation. There you have it.
The tablet has been that list has got to be like that now. I mean,
we'll see. Yeah, but it needs to be decided upon ability.
It should. It should. That's a strange, not a strange purchase. Buying Newcastle is not a strange purchase, but the position that they're in, because they could be they could very well be the richest club in the world that is playing in the championship.
Right now, they're in jeopardy.
Yeah, well, it's hard. Like people are like, oh, we're rich, we're gonna have all this money. January windows are hard to get your players in. Like it's not easy, and they might find themselves, 6-8 points adrift before they start getting themselves in. And I don't know, like it's not just because they got money now, it's not a foregone conclusion they're staying in the league.
The clock is ticking, and as in a series that I never watched, but I know the phrase is famous, winter is coming. Mr. Bradford, I believe that's a Game of Thrones quote, winter is coming. But for Newcastle, the clock is ticking and winter is coming in a metaphorical sense. Brad, I can't describe how enjoyable it is listening to somebody of your talent explain things like you did there. The listeners are going to feel identically. We owe you a great debt if these guys, or if I, my producers, listeners, or I can do you a turn in some way or another, we will, and our listeners will undoubtedly, when we put this out, tell you what a fucking first-class experience that was. Just pure joy. Thank you for being so generous with your time and your stories, and Godspeed, Brad Friedel.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it. Take care of yourself, and hopefully we'll cross paths soon.